Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today's session. Ms. Stacy is an experienced professional in Edtech and former entrepreneur in the travel industry. Stacy has worn many hats across her career with experience both inside and outside the classroom. She has been on the now virtual road working with international schools for more than 3 years across Europe, Middle East, and Africa, and South Asia. Stacy is passionate about learning and helping students learn how to learn. She works as a consultant with schools who wish to integrate technology and pedagogy for an improved teaching and learning experience in the classroom. Over to you, Ms. Stacy.
Thank you so much. It's really nice to meet all of you, virtually meet all of you. I wish I could have been there today, but maybe someday in the future. Hopefully, all travel bans open up and I'll be able to actually visit your school and all of you at your schools in the future. But anyway, for now, it's great to meet you virtually. So further to my introduction, which sounds really glowing, but I'll be super honest with you. Even though I have taught in the classroom quite a bit, I have not done it the way you have probably done it, like, day in and day out, teaching the same subject over an entire year. I get to do, and I sort of get to come in and do the flashy things, the fun things, the quizzes, the skills-based activities, and so on. And that has been my experience in the classroom. However, I've worked with so many schools over the last few years, mostly international schools. And one thing that has stuck with me is, of course, how to make students independent in terms of learning. And second is how to bring that independent learning into flipping classrooms, because that is the crux of what we do at the place where I work, which is Kognity. So I'm going to quickly share my present. Sorry, can you please enable the presentation to be shared for me? So while that's fixed, so the agenda of what we're actually going to cover in the session today, I'm going to be talking for maybe 10-15 minutes max. And the rest of the time is, I'm hoping, will be a very spirited and lively discussion between all of us on flipped learning and how you're doing it in your schools and your classes, what challenges you face, and so on. So we'll start off with a bit of an introduction to the company that I work at, which is Kognity. I'm going to literally run through that slide in a few seconds, and then we'll get to the meat of the matter, which is flipping the classroom. This, I guess, is the mandatory part of every Zoom session, I guess, at this point. But can you see my screen? You could just put it in the chat. If you can or cannot, or if you need it to be zoomed in or anything. Okay. Now, I hope all of you have your phones, because we're going to be using Padlet a little bit. So I'd like you, if you're not on the Zoom call and you are unable to put your thoughts and your answers in the chat, then Padlet is a place where you can do it. I've created a link which will be easy for you to type in. So basically bit.ly /Kognity CSTEC. So the link is right here at the bottom underneath the QR code, or you can also use the QR code right now and open the Padlet in a tab on your phone or your tablet or your laptop. Okay, so the link is bit.ly /Kognity CSTEC. You know what, I'm just going to actually copy this and put it in the chat for everyone. Okay, back to presenting. Okay, so we are going to go a little bit into the theory of flipping the classroom, and then when we come to the practice portion, I hope that we all have a very spirited discussion about how we are doing it right now. So back to the introductions. So to introduce Kognity a little bit further, so we are an award-winning digital publisher. We combine technology and content. So we have a learning platform, and we also have published resources on which are combined together to create a very elevated learning experience for students, to help them become more independent, to help teachers save time, to help you differentiate instruction more effectively. That is the power of our platform, and that is the core of what we do. And we currently have resources in IBDP and IGCSE and GCSE as well. So our positioning in EdTech is essentially we come right at the center. There are platforms, there are publishers, and very often integrating between the two is a challenge. And what we've done is created something that's an integrated solution, and we sit right in the center of publishing and platforms. A few key figures: we are present in over 109 countries globally. 64 million questions have been answered on our platform by students. And this number is actually outdated. We now have more than 1,000 schools since I made this presentation in the last week itself. So this is now 1,000 Kognity schools that we are currently working with. So let's get into the challenges of hybrid learning. Now, this is something that we internally have conducted surveys. Of course, surveys are limited based on the geography, the region in which we are collecting the information from. So we tend to do it in very small, restricted areas so that we get more focused insights. So this may not be entirely appropriate for the South Asia market, but this is definitely true on a slightly more global level. So one of the major challenges is that teachers have often complained, or they often ask for better tools, or they ask for the right technology to help them conduct hybrid learning with ease. Of course, in the last year and a half, schools have become more adept at it. So have teachers, so have students. But still, at this point, there are almost 50% of teachers who feel inadequately supported with either the right tech or with the right kind of training to conduct hybrid learning. And flipping the classroom is essentially the answer to most of the issues that you could possibly have with hybrid learning. So that's why we're going to get into it a little bit more deeper. Now, during lockdowns, during any kind of offline sessions or whatever, content coverage is another issue that most teachers have told us that they are facing. So catching up on large quantities of content, being able to ensure that it's not just covered, but it's covered right. It's covered in a way that teachers feel satisfied that yes, my students have definitely understood this topic to the level that they need to be able to score well in an exam. And the third thing is, of course, uncertainty. Tomorrow you may be back in the classroom. Day after tomorrow you may be back online. The next week you may be back in a hybrid session. It's sort of difficult to know right now because things can change. There may be another variant tomorrow. There might be another outbreak or another wave. And I'm knocking on wood as I'm saying this because I really don't want that to happen. But we have to sort of be prepared. And flipped learning is one easy way for you to prepare for uncertainty. So before we go forward with the presentation, I would actually like to play a quick Kahoot with all of you. So quickly going to share my screen again with the Kahoot. I hope you all have your phones ready. I'm going to reduce the volume a little bit more since I know that you're probably sick of hearing Kahoot music in your own classes. So it's very easy. This is actually a poll. So if you could just go to www.kahoot.it and type in the pin 366197. And please join with your first names. I'm going to give a couple more minutes for you to join in. Please do join in quickly. If anyone's having any difficulty using the Kahoot, please let me know and I can throw some instructions over here. Let me just put it here actually, www.kahoot.it. And the game pin is 366197. If some of you are joining the Zoom call over your phone, then maybe you need to steal the phone of someone sitting next to you so you can do this. Great. So I'm waiting for the rest of you, Mr. Ali, Miss Amina, Miss Aksa, Miss Asma, Miss Aisha, let's see, Miss Beenish, Miss Bisma, Miss Hurma, Miss Maham, Mrs. Sana has already joined in, Miss Naveen, Miss Rahil's already joined in, Miss Abiha, Miss Zareen, and all those of you who are in the room. I'm sorry, I don't know your names. I wish we could have had the opportunity to get to know each other. Okay, I'm just going to begin because I don't want to spend too much time waiting for everyone. You can possibly join in the middle of the poll, not a problem. Okay, this is not going to test any knowledge, so don't worry about that. Oh, hi, Ms. Beenish. Good to see you. Okay. So this is just for me to understand where all of you are, currently right now, where you're teaching, how you're teaching. So how are you currently teaching? Are you fully remote? Are you fully live? Do you have hybrid classes with a few students in class and a few students, joining in remotely? Is it a combination? You're remote one day, live another? Okay, so it's a combination of this. I don't think anyone is fully live right now. I wasn't expecting that, but interesting to see that there are participants who are in conducting different types of classes right now. Okay, the next poll. What curriculum do you currently teach? Okay, so a lot of Cambridge, Edexcel or GCSE teachers here. Interesting. I'm hoping you're all senior teachers because that is my level of expertise when we go into flipped classrooms. Are you on track to complete your content by examination time? Now, I know that no is not an option. Believe me, I know that. So there are 2 yeses, but with different conditions. Okay, so most of you are on track to complete all of your content, and that's great. But one of you is going to be struggling. That's interesting. Now we're going to get into a virtual show of hands. The thought of teachers not being the sage on the stage, but rather the guide on the side. So moving from becoming an instructor to a facilitator of education, a facilitator of learning. So does this excite you? Great. I'm glad to see that everyone's a yes, because I do feel that it is, part of the future of education, helping students learn how to learn and then facilitating them in that process rather than in the content. Next question. I want to give more autonomy to my students. There's a yes, there's a no, and there's a conditional yes, because one of the flip sides of providing more autonomy to students is you tend to lose control of where they are, how they're doing it, how much they are absorbing. And that is something that unless you have the right the assessment in place, it's very difficult to control that. There's one of you. I think technology is used effectively in my school. So if there are any tech administrators in the room, please feel free to answer as you see fit. Those of you who have not joined the Kahoot, but you would still like to leave a message in the chat to explain how you're using technology, what curriculum you're using, how you're teaching right now. Are you afraid of not being able to cover your content effectively? Please feel free to put it in the chat. I flipped the classroom. Okay, so one of you does, but wants to do it better, and two of you don't flip the classroom currently. So this is great. It gives me an understanding of, what your profile is of teaching and where to actually begin from when I talk about flipped learning. Thanks for your participation in this Kahoot. I'm going to move back to the presentation, and I'm going to step a little bit into the theory of flipped learning, but I'm sort of going to keep it simple. I know that most of you already know what flipped learning is and how to do it, but maybe there are a few barriers that are in your way to flip the learning. So you can put this answer in the chat, or yeah, you can just put the answer in the chat if you're on Zoom. When it comes to flipped learning, if you've read any articles about it, have you seen this very specific and very round percentage figure anywhere? And do you know what it means? 50%. It comes up a lot in flipped learning. I'll give you a few seconds. I'm going to open the chat and see. %50 is done by students without teachers' instructions. I mean, it could be. So 50% is something that you can keep that as a goal for work done by students versus work that you do together in the class. But this 50% is actually, it's part of a study by John Hattie, where he mentions that 50% of what is being taught in the classroom is known by students. So students already know half of what you're going to be covering in the classroom with them. But which half? To what extent? So if you're teaching topic A, B, and C, and they may know part of A, part of B, part of C, or they may know only A and part of B, or they may only know C, or whatever it is, how do you know what they know before you even begin? So one example is what I just did a Kahoot to, you can either use it as a baseline, or you can have a poll just to understand where students are, and then set the foundation from which you then conduct your class or facilitate the learning for the student onwards from that 50%, identifying what that 50% is first. So now, I don't know if there are any non-educators in this session. I know that most of you will be teachers, but I'm sure there may be a few administrators or IT people who, work on identifying the best resources to be used in schools. And as a result, you may not know Bloom's taxonomy. So is there anyone like that? Should I go a little bit into detail about what Bloom's taxonomy is? Okay, I'm not seeing anything in the chat. Oh, you would like me to go a little bit deeper into it. Great. So I actually added another slide to this just in case anyone on the administrator level or in the IT team for your school would like to have a little bit more understanding as to what Bloom's taxonomy. It's essentially when you break down the process of learning and you look at the cognitive stages that are a part of that learning, it's easy to identify at what level students can do what for that specific topic. So whether it's a skill, whether it's a topic, whether it's a like a piece of physical content that students have to learn, whatever it is, it usually tends to follow a process like this. Adult learners sort of especially nowadays when information is so easily accessible, tend to skip the first two and move straight to the analysis part, because you are an adult now and this is how you learn. But for students especially, it's very important to go through this stage by stage. Especially in the senior years, we see a lot of focus on the higher order thinking skills, that's creating, evaluating, analyzing. And you'll see in the lower grades a lot of emphasis on memorizing, understanding, applying, comprehension, and so on. Like all of that is what you generally tend to focus on in terms of learning skills in the early years, and before you move to the higher order thinking skills, especially from middle school onwards. Although you do have elements of this in primary as well, but the clear gradation is not entirely visible until you have more complex topics. So the first step is being able to remember information. The second is understanding and making sense out of it. There are the descriptors over here. I'm going to share this PPT with you later if you want to take a picture of this, or you want to see if you want to go dive deeper into Bloom's taxonomy, you can. Application, which is using information in a new but a similar situation. So being able to take that information and apply it in a different context or a different scenario, being able to actually use it in a problem. Analyzing, which is taking that information apart, breaking it down into smaller nuggets of data or facts, and then being able to categorize it, compare and contrast it, organize it in a way that's understandable. Evaluating and creation. This is usually where the higher order thinking skills that are the most difficult to bring into the classroom, purely because especially when you have a very diverse group of students, it can be very difficult to enforce this or practice it in a very systematic manner. So evaluating is the next part of it, which is examining information and making judgments. So critiquing, defending, criticizing, testing, all of this comes under evaluation. And finally, creating is to create something new, build, construct, design something from scratch. And that's what is the topmost part of the pyramid that you see here. Now, what usually happens in school, and especially this happened a lot, I remember when I was in school, which was several years ago, and probably something that you may recognize as teachers from when you were students, because especially now that you're on the other side of it, it may look, you may be able to contextualize this much better when you were in school. So in school, what I as a student used to do was basically memorize a lot of facts and figures, understand it a little bit, sure. When it came to math, that's where most of the application skills were applied. I would then sit and work on problems and then come up with the right answers and everything. And largely the work that I did in school remained in this lower order side of things. So when it comes to Bloom's taxonomy, this is just the cognitive element of it. There's also the affective and the sensory elements of Bloom's taxonomy in how students learn. Right now, we are only focusing on the cognitive side. And even then, back in school, we only focused on the lower order thinking skills on the cognitive side. And this is what we usually did in class. And anything that was higher order was something that was done through assignments, through projects, something that we had to do for ourselves at the time of the examination, because this was something that wasn't necessarily done in class, because there was a lot of syllabus to cover, and it was more important to get the basic knowledge and understanding out of the way, which is the bottom part of this pyramid. So the traditional approach has always been that the lower order learning takes place in class, and anything higher order happens at home. Now, if I have to define in theory what the flipped classroom approach is, you basically just flip where each part of this cognitive process takes place. So the flipped classroom approach, now instead of leaving the hard work for students to do at home, why not give them the easy work so that they'll be more motivated to do it at home, which is memorizing and understanding, having them just read certain things, and then bring that into class where you can then analyze, evaluate, and create together, because that is where students will need the most amount of help, and that is where you as the teacher can most effectively spend your time. So if you want your students to score an A star or hit a 7 or get 100 on 100 or whichever grading maximum that you can think of, being able to work on the bottom 3 of this pyramid can definitely ensure that your students may get from a 0 to an 80. But getting from that 80 to 100, that's what you need higher order thinking skills for. And that is something that students will find very difficult to do on your own, and where you as the teacher, the educator, are best placed to actually do. So that's, in a nutshell, in a very simplistic manner, how would you define a flipped classroom approach where the lower order thinking skills and the lower order learning happens at home and the higher order stuff happens in the classroom? Now, what does this look like in practice? It's good to have concepts, and it's good to think, okay, I'm going to do this XYZ way, and I'm going to try and apply this amazing idea for pedagogy into my classroom tomorrow. How do you go about doing it? It's actually not as easy as I'm sure some of you who would have tried to flip your classroom already, but maybe not found it easy to do so. There are a lot of barriers that can stand in the way. Some of the barriers are, of course, not knowing what your students know. The other barrier, so you don't know where to start from. The other is not having solid content that you can share with students so that they can actually read or understand at home and then come to the class and discuss with you. And so some of the other barriers are that it's not effective. It's very difficult to have accountability. So one problem, and this is especially true, I've heard it from so many schools in South Asia, students are so used to being spoon-fed. So the minute they have to do some work on their own, they become less accountable because they start asking questions. What is the teacher there for? Why should I have to do this on my own? Why can't the teacher give me this information? I've heard this so many times. So many teachers have complained about this to me. So I know that this is definitely a problem, accountability. How do you make sure that your students actually have understood, or they are doing the work, they're trying to do the work? So there are a lot of barriers, and we'll get into how you can address each of them one by one. So the first pillar of flipped learning, content delivery. I think this is the most time-consuming part, because not only do you have to find content that students can access easily at home, but also it has to be engaging, interesting. It has to cover all the parts of the syllabus that you want. This is not that easy to find. Of course, there are resources that are available. And especially if you're really great at Google searching, you will find amazing content that has already been created, and you don't need to reinvent the wheel again. So the first pillar of flipped learning is content delivery. How can you ensure that you have the right content? Second pillar of flipped learning, knowing what your students know. So we can talk about baseline assessments all day long. Finally, at the end of the day, you want your assessment to be short and sweet and something that maybe students don't know that they are being assessed, or they don't feel that they are being assessed, or even if they're being assessed, it doesn't make them feel that they don't know what they should know, right? So it's an assessment that has to be very clear to students that it's not summative in nature. They're not going to be graded on the basis of this. Something like there are no wrong answers. So the minute you tell your students that, they may feel a little less stressed about answering an assessment before they even learn something. And the third one is student self-management. So this is where accountability comes into play, because you're not just trying to flip the classroom so that you can cover the content better, but you're trying to create a culture of independent learning with the student. So whether or not it's a flipped class, wouldn't it be better if students did some pre-reading before every single class? If they knew what you were teaching and they did some pre-reading and came prepared, wouldn't that be great? But how do you get students from being spoon-fed to then having that culture built in? It's not an easy process, and it is going to take time, and it starts with small steps on a daily basis that you can do. So some easy, okay, I have to give you full disclosure that all of the screenshots or the videos that are a part of this presentation are from Kognity, because we as a platform are designed to do just this. So you will see a lot of tags to Kognity, but there are more resources than Kognity out there. There's YouTube, there's PHET, there's a whole bunch of encyclopedias, Wikipedias, you name it. There are all kinds of resources out there that you can access. Finding the right one, of course, if you are mostly Cambridge or IGCSE Edexcel teachers, Cambridge and Edexcel themselves are publishers, so they have a lot of content out there that you can use. They have a lot of content that's available for free that you can use. If you join WhatsApp groups or Telegram groups or Signal groups, there are so many of them that have a list of resources for each subject. So definitely, the minute you step out there and start looking, you will find all kinds of content. But over here, of course, we're showing you Kognity content. So reading assignments to flip the classroom. So assigning reading or a pre-recorded lesson. If you are not able to find the right resource, but you want to be able to share information with students, you can record yourself and ask and make sure that students have finished watching that video. Accountability can be built in multiple ways. So if you are a teacher and you want to put these videos on YouTube, you can actually see how many people have watched your video. You can see at what point they drop off. You can see if your students, you can ask them to leave a comment on your video so that you know that they have watched the video of you explaining that concept. Accountability can be built in multiple ways, but this is one of the ways. If you're sending it to them on WhatsApp, you can ask them to summarize, and it acts as a great test of understanding, like a baseline. If you can ask them to summarize what you said in 3 sentences, or what you covered in just 3 sentences. And then you know how much students have picked up from what you've presented to them and what is left for them to actually understand deeper. So this ensures that the lower order thinking is covered at home, where they memorize, perhaps, let's say you want them to just memorize some text. You can just ask them to memorize that text. And of course, there's an easy way to test this as soon as class begins with a very quick 5-question Kahoot. It will not take more than 5 minutes, but it will immediately give you an understanding which student is where. And that's how you know that students have done the reading, of course. Pillar 2, knowing what your students know. So again, the screenshot is from Kognity, but you have a vast array of tools, free tools that are available to you at each step. So of course, you can use Google Forms, you can use other LMSs. I'm sure your schools have some LMSs already in place that you can use. Maybe some may do the job better than others, but at its core, what you want is just to understand where students are. And as an initial step, even just a small quiz on Google Forms is more than enough. Just 4 questions or 5 questions. The simpler you keep it, the more students will participate. So you can identify, I would suggest a Kahoot Always. Kahoots are always fun. There's an element of competition involved, especially if they get to be on the leaderboard. So you don't just test them for what they know, but like how fast they're able to answer it. So students love that. So if you start every class with a quiz, I mean, you know what students know and what needs to be plugged in. And you know if students have actually done the work that you assigned to them or not. And of course, when you use more sophisticated tools like Kognity, but also other tools, once you use more sophisticated tools, you're able to even identify, you can see timelines of how students are learning. You can start differentiating based on where they stand. So of course, this snapshot is from Kognity, and it's our stats section, which show you for each student and each topic, are they in the red, yellow, or green zone, a very easy heat map system. There are a lot of softwares that offer a similar system, of course. It's a very common thing in EdTech, heat maps. So of course we have it too. And pillar 3, self-management. So what is actually really hard about self-management? Why is that such a difficult skill for students to build in themselves? So of course we love our kids and we want to mollycoddle them and we want to give them all the tools, all the information, whatever it takes for them to succeed. To some extent, even though our heart is in the right place, by giving them too much, we are not really challenging the inquirer in them. And that's what we want to really bring out. When students are engaged and they feel like as if they have a say, they have control over what they're learning, they tend to take more interest. They tend to be more willing to do the work. They have some skin in the game, so to speak. They are more motivated. So giving students the ability to self-assess. So this, I have heard a lot of feedback from teachers, both pro and against, about how self-assessment is really hard for students to do. They don't have the tools to do it. But how can you start small? How can you start with very basic levels of self-assessment, only testing for knowledge and understanding before you then move on into higher forms of self-assessment? You can start by giving students a little bit more control to be able to understand where they themselves are going wrong, and then only provide the feedback when they identify that they have. Smaller, it can start small before you go into full exam style essay questions. Engaging interactive learning. Now this is key. Students these days, I'm not so old, but even I feel like saying it sometimes, students these days have a very low attention span. It's so hard for them to focus on one thing. So the best way to do this is to start small. If it's a complex topic, what is the simplest language that a complex topic can be explained in? Because we as teachers, you tend to be experts in your subject. You tend to use the language of experts, the jargon of experts. But how can we simplify it in a way like an explainer video, like what Vox does, for instance? They explain very complex topics in the simplest of languages. So there are a lot of videos and already created simulations online. There are a lot of games that students can play, which makes it interacting and engaging, where they're able to absorb a lot of information in a short span of time, as opposed to reading the text. So if you can find resources like this, 2-minute videos, 2-minute explainers, if you just type 2-minute explainers on YouTube, you'll find a whole bunch of teachers who've already done this work. Continuous built-in assessment. This is a very Kognity specific thing where students can identify their own strengths, weaknesses by continuing to take self-directed assessment and self-directed reading. But there are a lot of other tools out there which allow students to sort of practice on their own. There are a lot of practice centers that, there are a lot of softwares like Assess Prep and things like that, which offer assessment specific, resources out there where students can just independently practice. You as a teacher can unlock questions for them where they can then practice on their own. And then you can also keep track, because it's online, you can keep track of who's doing what. So practice centers are key here for continuous built-in assessment, creating a culture of assessment. You want students to not be afraid of assessment anymore. So always you start small, break it down into the smallest bite-sized piece, the smallest bit of information, build their confidence every time they answer the question correctly, and then you can move to the bigger questions over time. And that becomes a more sustained way for students to then be more willing to be accountable, to manage their own time, to manage their own reading, to even start managing their own assessment. Something that when I was in school, it was very hard for anyone to get me to assess myself. So these are the three key pillars. Now we're going to move into Q&As because I'm sure I didn't really stop for questions so far. And I'm sure you will have questions. Okay. Would anyone like to shoot with a question? Any thoughts and ideas? Okay, so I have some questions for you. So two of you mentioned in the Kahoot, what about the students who do not pre-read? So how do we build a culture of reading? So the cardinal mistake is when you share information that students need, but information that they do not want. And you can't always get what you want, of course, and what you need is what you need. It's part of the syllabus. You can't change it. Students have to read it. But is there a fun way to explain the exact same thing? Is there a fun way to get students involved in that specific topic? Now, especially if you're new in your teaching career, you haven't had the time to create these kind of resources for yourselves, there are a lot of resources out there. So what I would suggest is go on YouTube, go on Vimeo, find these forums where other teachers in the Cambridge are also, present and sharing resources. I'm on so many WhatsApp groups where I see this all the time. And you'll find 5-minute videos, 10-minute videos that explain something complex. If students had to read that same information instead of watching a video, it would probably take them half an hour. And I'm not sure how many of you have read the statistic, but they say that you only remember 10% of what you read, but you remember almost 50% of what you see in an audio-visual context. So if you read a script versus if you watch a movie, you'll remember half the movie and you'll only remember 10% of the script. So if students are unwilling to read, you can try assigning some pre-reading to begin with, but I would strongly recommend videos. Students love videos. They watch a lot of videos. How many reels do they watch on a daily basis? I know students, while I'm teaching them, someone has sent the other one a reel of some dog barking or something. So I'm so sorry. So what I would recommend is if students are not willing to read, assign them a video, try and find the easiest or shortest or most fun video, try and find a song or something that someone has covered that other teachers have probably already covered that, and make sure that you have given them the questions in advance. Give them your 3 questions. Yeah, 2 videos are of course more interesting, but what I would suggest is the 3-question formula. 3 key takeaways that you want students to remember from that video. Give them these questions in advance. So they have to watch the video to then come up with the answers to those 3 questions. And if they haven't answered those 3 questions for you, that's at that point you can say that, okay, you clearly haven't watched the video because you haven't answered these 3 questions. So go out, watch the video and come back in. Or I mean, if it's an online version of that. So I recommend videos. I've seen it work everywhere. Students love it. They find it more interesting. They remember more from watching videos. If you give them questions in advance, they pay more attention to the video because then they know they're searching for the answer for that question. Any other questions from anyone in the room? Okay, so then I have a couple of questions. So for the 2 people who earlier mentioned that they haven't started flipping the classroom yet, they don't flip the classroom right now. Can I ask you, do you intend to? And what have been the barriers for you to do so? Sorry, I don't remember who it was because I couldn't see who answered which question, but there were two of you in the Kahoot. Okay, Sacred Heart, Bahrain. Okay. Um, is there any reason why you haven't been able to flip the classroom so far? Do you want to start flipping the classroom? English language, and I perceive flipping the classroom would not pay off well. Okay, so what do you see as the major barrier here? Ms. Beanish, what do you see as the major barrier? Implicit questions. No, that's a fair point. When it comes to languages, honestly speaking, most of the learning, there isn't a lot of facts being consumed anyway in the classroom, right? It's a lot of skills, a lot of communication skills that you actively get to use even in your very basic questions. Knowledge and understanding is a very small portion versus, all the comprehension and the understanding and the analysis and all of that, which comes later. Vocabulary is the major barrier. Fair enough. So, I mean, not to blow my own company's horn, but Kognity has a dictionary inbuilt. So all of our content, as students are reading it, they don't need to step out and look at the definition and come back. They can just select the word and they immediately get the definition. So, okay. For the one person who said that they have flipped the classroom before, can you share your experience and what you consider to be like the highlights of flipping your classroom? What are the benefits, etc.? Again, I'm sorry, I don't know who it was. But I definitely use flipping in my sociology class while teaching subcultures. Sure. Yes, thanks, Mrs. Sana. So is there anything that you'd like to share about how you've been flipping the classroom with the rest of the room? Okay, great. So it was effective in the sociology class. So that's good to hear. So did you have some sort of exercise or activity that you did later, or was it like a general discussion with your class? Using Jamboards. That's nice. Oh, you teach ICT. So of course it has to be a part of your class because you teach ICT. So you already know all the tech tools and you already, have all the information available to you on how to flip the classroom. Any tips that you would like to share with everyone else in the room? If you could even just list out the tools that you have used in the past, what you found most effective. Edtech, Padlet. Has anyone put any of your answers in the Padlet link? I haven't seen any so far. Padlet, Google Forms. Yes, Google Forms is excellent for assessment, especially for very formative style assessment where you're just, you use a lot of MCQs and stuff. Neopods is also a great resource. Okay, I'm going to put my email ID in the chat so that I can share a copy of this presentation with you if you'd like. You can please just send me an email, stacy.vaz@kognity.com. Oh, yes, Movie Maker. It's an excellent tool. I actually haven't encountered a lot of teachers who use Movie Maker. If what does he have? Okay, so I'm not sure if I can unmute you on my end, but if anyone would like to just like talk about your experiences with flipping the classroom, if you can just raise your hand, and then let me see if I can do it. Mrs. Sana. Oh, yes, I can. Mrs. Sana, I've done the thing where you can talk now. If you'd like to just unmute and share your experience.
Okay, my name is Miss Sana. I've been teaching ICT for almost 3 years. Initially, I started up with Scratch. It was a very good program. I'm not a computers background, but I know how to work on computers. I have been using it for quite some time because I'm an MBA in finance, so I've used computers a lot in my degree and everything. So that's why I was very comfortable with the gadget, you can say. So I used Scratch, I learned it, and it was a very good experience in terms of using Jamboards and Google Forms. Students are able to, I can say, relate to it more easily because everything is technology based now.
Yes.
Books are becoming obsolete, even though I am from the old school. I believe what knowledge you get from books, you can't get from the computers, even though I have taught computers. So teaching Movie Maker was a new experience for me because I've never taught it, but it was a really big learning experience. I learned a lot from it. Students were really happy about it. I taught spreadsheets in terms of how to put formulas, how to do averages on a spreadsheet, and how to check out your performance. And we had discussion rooms in Padlet, and it was a good experience. I mean, it was an overall something that was, but not for lower grades, grades like 5 above.
Yeah.
For smaller kids, it becomes a bit difficult for them to manage. So grades above 5, they are students who are able to relate to you and get that result out.
Thank you so much for your contribution, Mrs. Sana. If there's anyone else who'd like to add anything, I have given everyone the ability to unmute yourself and just add your comments if you'd like, your experience with flipped learning. I think we have about 5 minutes more, if I'm not mistaken. So really would like to open up the discussion.
Yes, Miss, thank you very much. It is a very important session. Since the pandemic has been started, all the educators get into very much trouble how to communicate with the students and how to exchange the information. So it was a very big task for the educationists, how to cope up with the studies, and it was a very long time duration. So at the time we started with the Zoom, WhatsApp, whatever we have, Skype, and we used it. But by the time as all the software tools developers, they issue so many tools like Kahoot, Butter, Padlet, Google Classroom. Yes, it's very good. So all these tools are very amazing with amazing tools, and it all catches different types of subjects. And yes, it's difficult to learn all the tools, but the educationists went through that struggle. They work hard, they prepared their slides, they went through the videos and all the tools. How can they cope up with the problems. So it was an interactive session, and how to get the students into this platform to accommodate those students, because every student is not available for this online education system. Now we get through it, and the parents and the students are aware of this technology. So there are so many tools. By the time
Yeah.
and time, new technologies has been invented, and we are going through it. So I must say it was a very interesting being a principal for me. I was using so many tools, and just motivated my teachers. Yes, use it. I'm with you. We practice with each other, and then we share the slides and the presentation with our students. So yes, it is a good journey. Thank you very much.
I'm really glad to hear that, actually, and especially, a very supportive school system where everyone is open to new tech. That is just the dream. I've seen so many schools where, sometimes your fellow teachers are not necessarily as interested. So then it's not as conducive an environment to share new tech and new resources. But I'm glad that you've had that experience. Would anyone else like to add anything? I think we have 2 minutes more. Okay. All right, then. Thank you so much for attending the session. I know it was very broad, and the session was intended to just give a few tips and tricks here and there. But I hope that it was still enough for you to maybe motivate you to, if you haven't yet flipped your class, to start flipping your class. I hope it's given you a few tricks to do it initially in a small way, so that it's not too much of a stress or a workload on you. If you'd like to find out more about how Kognity can decrease your stress load and help you flip the classroom, please do reach out to me. My email ID is stacy.vaz@kognity.com. I'm just putting it down here for you again. And I'll be happy to show you how our resource works, and you can identify if it could be a good fit into your teaching and learning practices. Thank you so much, and have a good rest of the evening. Enjoy the conference. I know there's one more day, so I hope you enjoy all the sessions tomorrow as well. Have a good day. Bye, everyone.